My husband of 8 years announced he was leaving me during Thanksgiving dinner at his parents' estate, humiliating me in front of his entire family. 4 months later, I discovered he'd been having an affair with his secretary when I found the diamond bracelet receipt in our joint credit card statement, the same bracelet his mother had complimented Ashley on at that very dinner. 6 months after that, I walked into the annual Miller family summer barbecue with a portfolio of evidence under my arm and the keys to my new corner office at the firm that had just acquired my husband's company. The look on Daniel's face when his father handed me the ceremonial whiskey glass reserved for family achievements instead of him? That moment made every tear worth it. I still remember the warm, cinnamon-scented air of the Miller family kitchen that Thanksgiving day. Catherine, my mother-in-law, was fussing over her famous apple pie while I arranged the final touches on the charcuterie board that had become my expected contribution to family gatherings. 8 years of marriage to Daniel had settled me comfortably into the rhythms and traditions of the Miller family. The seating arrangements at their massive oak dining table, the way Richard always carved the turkey while telling the same jokes, the subtle competition between siblings over whose life updates would impress their parents most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I was Rebecca Miller, née Carson, age 34. Once a rising marketing associate with dreams of running my own campaigns, I'd stepped back from my career ambitions when Daniel's position at Cascade Financial Partners required relocation to Portland. "It's just temporary," he'd assured me, his blue eyes earnest as we packed up our Seattle apartment. "Once I establish myself, you can restart your career. This move is for us, for our future." That future had stretched into 8 years of me taking increasingly smaller roles, administrative work at the school district that I was overqualified but perfect for, according to the sympathetic principal who hired me. Meanwhile, Daniel's dossier's star rose. Senior investment advisor became assistant director, became regional director. Each promotion celebrated with champagne I selected, in homes I decorated, at parties I organized. I became the perfect corporate wife, the steadying presence behind his success. That Thanksgiving, I'd spent 3 days preparing, shopping for ingredients for my assigned dishes, selecting a burgundy dress that matched the autumn theme Catherine preferred, wrapping thoughtful gifts for each family member. Daniel had been distant, working late most nights in the weeks leading up to the holiday. I attributed it to end-of-year financial pressures. Another thing I'd learned as a corporate wife, the ebb and flow of attention based on quarterly reports and client demands. The first sign something was truly wrong came when Daniel insisted on driving separately to his parents' home in Bend. "I might need to duck out for a client call," he explained, not quite meeting my eyes as he adjusted his tie in our bedroom mirror. "No sense in you missing any of the festivities." I ignored the twinge of unease. After years of putting his career first, unexpected work interruptions were hardly unusual. I drove the 2-hour journey alone, rehearsing small talk and mentally preparing compliments for Catherine's renovated kitchen. The Miller estate sat on 3 landscaped acres overlooking the Deschutes River, a testament to Richard's 40 successful years in investment banking. By the time I arrived, the driveway was filled with familiar vehicles: Matt's practical SUV, Emily and Paul's luxury sedan, and parked somewhat conspicuously near the front, a shiny red Audi I didn't recognize. Catherine embraced me at the door, perfumed and elegant as always in her cashmere sweater and pearls. "Rebecca, darling, we were beginning to worry. Daniel arrived nearly an hour ago." My smile faltered. He drove separately. Work calls. Something flickered across Catherine's face. Discomfort, perhaps even pity. Before I could analyze it, she ushered me inside, where holiday chaos provided convenient distraction. Emily's children were racing through the hallway, Richard was loudly debating politics with Paul, and the rich sense of turkey and stuffing permeated everything. I placed my containers of roasted vegetables and cranberry compote in the kitchen, then moved to the living room, searching for Daniel. He stood near the fireplace, tumbler of whiskey in hand, deep in conversation with his brother Matt. But what froze me in the doorway wasn't Daniel. It was the woman perched elegantly on the arm of the leather sofa, laughing at something Richard had said. Ashley Parker, Daniel's executive assistant. The woman he'd hired 6 months ago. She wore a forest green wrap dress that highlighted her figure, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders, and on her wrist, catching the firelight with every animated gesture, was a delicate diamond tennis bracelet I'd never seen before. Daniel noticed me then, his conversation with Matt abruptly cutting off. "Becca, you made it." His voice carried an unfamiliar strain. No kiss, not even a move toward me, just those 4 inadequate words. "What is Ashley doing here?" I asked quietly, still frozen in the doorway. The room didn't fall silent dramatically like in movies. Conversations continued. Children still squealed in the hallway, but a bubble of terrible awareness formed around the 3 of us, Daniel, Ashley, and me. "Let's talk privately," Daniel muttered, finally crossing to take my elbow. "Daniel, is everything all right?" Catherine called from where she'd appeared behind me. "Fine, Mom. Just need a quick word with Becca." He guided me to Richard's study, all mahogany and leather with hunting prints on the walls. A room for difficult conversations between men. It seemed fitting somehow. "I wanted to wait until after dinner," Daniel began, closing the door. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Wait for what? Why is your secretary at Thanksgiving dinner?" The question emerged sharper than I'd intended, edged with the anxiety that had been building for weeks. "Assistant," he corrected automatically. "Executive. Assistant." Of all the absurd details to focus on. I stared at him, this man I'd built my life around, suddenly a stranger in his tailored shirt and carefully maintained stubble. "Ashley is here because—" He paused, ran a hand through his hair, the nervous gesture I'd once found endearing. "Because things have changed, Becca. We've changed. I've changed." "What are you saying?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. The late nights, the emotional distance, the separate cars. I'm in love with Ashley. 5 words, delivered with a terrible gentleness. I didn't plan for it to happen, these things. They just do sometimes. The room seemed to tilt. "You're having an affair." It started as a close working relationship. She understands my ambitions, the pressures I'm under. She challenges me intellectually. We connect on a level that you and I haven't in years. Each word was a precise cut, not just betrayal, but the suggestion that I was somehow intellectually insufficient, that I hadn't been challenging enough, that our connection had diminished, as if it had happened passively, not as a result of his choices. "And you brought her to Thanksgiving dinner? To your parents' home?" My voice had gone very quiet. Daniel had the grace to look uncomfortable at least. "Everyone knows, Becca. I've been talking to them for weeks. Mom, Dad, Matt, Emily. I wanted their support before I told you." The second betrayal hit harder than the first. Not just my husband, but my in-laws, people I'd considered family for 8 years. The homemade gifts still in my car. The recipes. I'd learned because Catherine preferred them. All those years trying to belong, and they'd discussed my marriage's end without me. "So I'm the last to know that my husband is leaving me," I said, each word precise despite the earthquake happening. Inside me. "I'm sorry. I wanted to be sure before upending everything. I needed a plan." "A plan," I repeated. "And what is your plan, Daniel?" He straightened slightly, shifting into the confident posture he used for client presentations. "I'll be moving. Out, of course. My attorney has prepared separation papers. We can keep things amicable, Divide assets fairly. I don't want to cause you unnecessary pain. Unnecessary pain. As if the necessary pain he'd already inflicted wasn't monumental. And Ashley? Was bringing her here part of your carefully considered plan? He had the decency to look embarrassed. That was, perhaps, premature. But Mom invited her. They've become close, and since everyone already knew. Everyone except me, I finished for him. A knock at the door saved him from responding. Catherine's voice called through, "Daniel, the turkey's ready. Your father wants to start." Daniel glanced at the door, then back at me, conflict evident in his expression. Even now, he was calculating how to manage appearances, how to control the narrative. "We should continue this conversation later," he said. "For now, let's just get through dinner." Get through dinner, as if we were discussing a mild inconvenience, like burnt rolls or an awkward seating arrangement, not the public dismantling of our 8-year marriage. "You want me to sit through Thanksgiving dinner across from your mistress?" I asked, disbelief coloring every word. "She's not," he started, then stopped. "It would make things easier. For everyone. For everyone. For him. For the family that had known for weeks and said nothing." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For Ashley, who had apparently been welcomed while I remained ignorant. "Easier," I echoed. The numbness was wearing off, giving way to something hot and unfamiliar. Not quite anger, something more clarifying. Indignation, perhaps. Self-respect. I lifted my chin. "I've spent 8 years making things easier for you, Daniel. I left my career. I moved to Portland. I became the wife your family expected. And this is how you repay that sacrifice?" He frowned. "You're being dramatic. Those were choices we made together, for our future." "Your future," I corrected. "It's always been about your future. And now that future includes Ashley. Do I have that right?" "Becca?" "Answer the question, Daniel." He sighed, impatience replacing any pretense of remorse. "Yes. My future includes Ashley. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but it's the truth." Another knock, more insistent. "Daniel!" Catherine again, sounding concerned. "Coming, Mom," he called back, then turned to me. "Please, Becca, let's be adults about this. We can announce it properly after dinner." I looked at my husband. This selfish stranger with his practiced expressions and convenient justifications, and made a decision. "No." "No?" His brow furrowed, unused to direct opposition from me. "I'm not sitting through a performance of Happy Family Thanksgiving so you can manage your announcement on your preferred timeline. You've had weeks to prepare. You've enlisted your entire family. You've brought your mistress to dinner. You don't get to control this too." I moved past him to the door, a strange calm settling over me. "Becca, don't—" he started, but I was already opening the door. Catherine stood there, hand raised to knock again. "I understand you've known for some time that Daniel is leaving me for Ashley," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I just found out about 30 seconds ago, so you'll have to excuse me if I don't feel like passing the cranberry sauce and pretending everything is fine." Catherine's face drained of color. Behind her in the hallway, Matt had appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Rebecca, Catherine began. "Save it," I interrupted, surprised by my own boldness. "Enjoy your Thanksgiving. I'm sure Ashley makes excellent roasted vegetables, too." I brushed past her, through the hallway where conversations died as I passed into the grand foyer with its harvest decorations and family photos in which I featured prominently. 8 years of holidays, vacations, celebrations, all carefully framed and displayed. All a lie. Richard appeared from the dining room, carving knife still in hand. "Rebecca, we're ready to start. Where's Daniel?" Ask Ashley, I said, grabbing my coat from the rack. Apparently she's family now. I'm just the soon-to-be ex-wife no one bothered to inform. Richard's face registered shock, then dismay. Now, Rebecca, let's not make a scene. Whatever's happening between you and Daniel is apparently common knowledge to everyone but me, I finished for him. Including you. Did you help him select that diamond bracelet for her, Richard? The one on her wrist right now? You always did have excellent taste in jewelry. From the dining room doorway, Ashley herself appeared, her expression a careful mask of sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. The bracelet in question gleamed obscenely on her slim wrist. The entire tableau was suddenly, viciously clear. I was the outsider here. Perhaps I always had been. The Carson girl who'd married into the Miller dynasty, useful while she fit the narrative, disposable when a more advantageous arrangement presented itself. I think it's best if I go, I said, addressing no one in particular and everyone at once. Rebecca, please. Catherine stepped toward me, maternal concern visibly warring with her desire to preserve the holiday. At least stay for dinner. We can discuss everything calmly. I've lost my appetite, I replied, pulling on my coat. And apparently, my husband and my in-laws, all in one convenient Thanksgiving package. Daniel finally emerged from the study, his face set in the tight expression he used when a client was being unreasonable. Becca, you're embarrassing yourself, he said quietly. Let's talk about this like adults. It was the second time he'd used that phrase, like adults, as if my hurt and shock were somehow childish compared to his calculated betrayal. I'm embarrassing myself? I repeated, a disbelieving laugh escaping me. That's rich, coming from a man who brought his mistress to Thanksgiving dinner before telling his wife he was leaving her. Emily had appeared now with her husband Paul, the children mercifully absent. The entire Miller clan arrayed before me, their faces showing varying degrees of discomfort, sympathy, and impatience. I've spent 8 years trying to be the perfect Miller wife, I said, looking at each of them in turn. I changed my career, my home, my priorities, my cooking, even the way I dress, all to fit into this family. And now I find out that none of it mattered, that I was always conditional, temporary. That's not true, Catherine protested weakly. Isn't it? You've known for weeks that your son was leaving me. You invited his mistress to Thanksgiving. You watched me bring homemade gifts and side dishes for a family that had already decided I didn't belong. No one contradicted me. Keep the vegetables, I said, turning to leave. Consider them my parting contribution to the Miller family. Traditions. As I walked out the door, I heard Daniel call after me. Don't drive upset, Becca. At least calm down first. Even now, concerned with appearances, with what the neighbors might think of a distraught woman speeding away from the family estate on Thanksgiving. I didn't respond. I simply got in my car, backed out of the driveway lined with luxury vehicles, and drove away from the Miller estate, for what I thought would be the last time. The 2-hour drive back to Portland passed in a state of suspended emotion. Not quite shock, not quite grief, not quite rage, but some numbing combination that allowed me to operate a vehicle while my life collapsed around me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply drove, the golden hills of Central Oregon giving way to pine forests, then the outskirts of the city I'd reluctantly made home. Our house, no, Daniel's house, as I suddenly understood it had always been, sat dark and unwelcoming in the upscale Eastmoreland neighborhood. I parked in the driveway but couldn't bring myself to go inside. Instead, I sat watching the windows of our neighbors' homes, glimpses of Thanksgiving gatherings visible through partially drawn curtains, families intact, lives proceeding as planned. My phone had been buzzing periodically during the drive. I finally looked at it. 6 missed calls from Daniel, 2 from Catherine. Text messages I couldn't bear to read. Instead, I scrolled to a different name and pressed call. "Becca?" Olivia answered, the sounds of a gathering audible in the background. "Happy Thanksgiving! How's the Miller family extravaganza?" "Liv," I said, my voice finally breaking. "Can I come over?" To her eternal credit, Olivia asked no questions. "Of course. We've got plenty of food. Do you remember how to get here?" "Yes, thank you." "Drive safe. I'll meet you outside." I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway of the house I'd decorated but never quite felt at home in. As I drove toward Olivia's modest bungalow in the Selwood neighborhood, something odd happened. With each mile, breathing became slightly easier, as if the weight of performing as Rebecca Miller was lifting, allowing Rebecca Carson to resurface. By the time I reached Olivia's street, lined with smaller homes strung with early Christmas lights, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not the end of my story. It was a brutal, unexpected chapter, but the book was far from finished. Olivia was waiting on her porch as promised, concern evident in her posture even before I could make out her expression. As I stepped from the car, she descended the steps and wrapped me in a fierce hug. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out," she said firmly. And for the first time since walking into the Miller estate and seeing Ashley perched on that leather sofa, I allowed myself to cry. Later, after I'd shared the whole sordid story with Olivia over pie at her kitchen table, her Thanksgiving guests tactfully departed, she asked the question that would ultimately change everything. "So what are you going to do now?" I looked up from the untouched slice of pumpkin pie, surprised. In the haze of shock and betrayal, I hadn't thought beyond the immediate crisis. What was I going to do? Return to the house I shared with Daniel, and wait for him to come home with his separation papers? Find an apartment? Call my sister Natalie in Seattle? Olivia watched me process, her expression thoughtful. "You know what? Don't answer now. Stay here tonight. Tomorrow's soon enough." To start making plans. I nodded, grateful for the reprieve. "But Becca?" she added, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "When you do start planning, and I know you will because I remember the Rebecca Carson who orchestrated that brilliant Westfield campaign fresh out of college, remember this. You don't have to disappear quietly just because that's what would be convenient for Daniel." Her words lingered as I lay awake that night on her guest room futon, staring at the ceiling, replaying 8 years of gradually surrendering myself to become Mrs. Daniel Miller. The prestigious marketing position I'd abandoned, the creative impulses I'd channeled into dinner parties and holiday decorations, the opinions I'd learned to soften or withhold entirely at Miller family gatherings. Somewhere around 3 in the morning as Portland's November rain tapped against the window, that clarifying feeling I'd experienced in Richard's study returned. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. Something more powerful. Determination. The Millers, Daniel, his parents, his siblings, had treated me as disposable, replaceable. A temporary character in their ongoing family saga. Even worse, I had allowed it. I had participated in my own diminishment, shrinking myself year by year to fit the role they had assigned me. No more. As the first gray light of post-Thanksgiving, dawn filtered through Olivia's guest room blinds, I made a promise to myself. This humiliation would not define me. What happened next would be on my terms, not Daniel's, not his attorneys, not the Miller family's. For the first time in 8 years, I began to plan a future that centered entirely on what I wanted, and against all odds, as I finally drifted to sleep with rain still pattering against the window, I found myself almost grateful to Daniel and Ashley. They had broken my heart, yes, humiliated me, certainly, but they had also, unwittingly, set me free. The first week after Thanksgiving passed in a blur of practical matters that kept me mercifully distracted from the emotional devastation. Olivia insisted I stay with her while I figured out my next steps, converting her home office into a makeshift bedroom that quickly became my refuge. I called in sick to the school district, using accumulated vacation days to give myself space to breathe. Meanwhile, Daniel's calls and messages continued relentlessly until I finally responded with a single text: "Communicate through attorneys only." His response was immediate. "Don't be difficult, Becca. Let's handle this like rational people." That word again. Rational. As if my pain were an inconvenient emotional outburst rather than a reasonable response to betrayal. I didn't reply. On the Monday after Thanksgiving, I contacted Marcus Jacobson, a family attorney Olivia had worked with during her own divorce 3 years earlier. His office was in a converted Victorian in Northwest Portland, the interior surprisingly modern, and bright despite the historic exterior. "So," Marcus said after I'd outlined the situation, his manner direct but kind, "your husband ambushed you with separation plans at Thanksgiving dinner, after already informing his entire family and bringing his affair partner to the event. And now he wants you to follow his preferred timeline for dissolving the marriage." "That's accurate," I confirmed, appreciating his blunt summary. Marcus nodded, making notes on a legal pad. "Mrs. Miller, Ms. Carson," I corrected, the decision spontaneous but immediately right. "I'll be returning to my maiden name." He smiled slightly. "Ms. Carson, what are your priorities in this separation? What matters most to you?" The question caught me off guard. Throughout my marriage, I'd grown accustomed to considering Daniel's priorities first. What mattered to me had become secondary, sometimes forgotten entirely. Now, faced with this direct inquiry, I found myself struggling to articulate my own wants. "I need time to think about that," I admitted. "Take all the time you need," Marcus replied, setting down his pen. "But while you're thinking, let me share an observation. Most clients in your situation are concerned primarily with financial security. That's understandable and important. But the clients who navigate divorce most successfully also consider what they want their life to look like afterward." "After," I repeated, the concept both terrifying and vaguely thrilling. "Yes, after. When this legal process is complete, when the dust settles, who do you want to be? What do you want to be doing? Where do you want to live? Those questions matter as much as how assets are divided." I left Marcus's office with preliminary paperwork and his advice echoing in my mind. Who did I want to be after Daniel? The question followed me through Portland's persistent rain as I walked several blocks before finding refuge in a small cafe, ordering tea more for the comfort of something warm to hold than from any desire to drink it. The cafe had a wall of community flyers, local bands, yoga classes, roommate wanted ads. My eyes caught on one printed on pale blue paper. "Career Transition Workshop for Women Re-Entering the Workforce. Hosted by Evergreen Marketing Solutions." Marketing. My original path, abandoned for Daniel's career. I took a photo of the flyer with my phone, noting the workshop was scheduled for the following evening. That night, I returned to Olivia's to find a stack of boxes on her porch. My belongings from the house, packed by Daniel or perhaps Ashley. A note taped to the top box read, "These seemed personal. The rest of your things are at the house whenever you're ready to collect them. We should talk. D. We. Not I. Already. A unit with Ashley, making decisions about my possessions. Olivia helped me carry the boxes inside. Want me to check what's in them?" She offered, correctly reading my reluctance to confront this tangible evidence of my marriage's end. I nodded, watching as she opened the first box. "Photo albums," she reported. "Your college yearbooks. Some framed pictures of your family." She moved to the second box. "Books. Looks like novels mostly." The third, "Art supplies? There's an unopened set of watercolors here, some sketchbooks." "My birthday gift from Natalie last year. I said, remembering my sister's encouragement to revisit the artistic hobbies I'd enjoyed before marriage. Daniel thought it was impractical. Olivia's expression hardened slightly. Any other impractical interests he discouraged? The question hit harder than expected. How many parts of myself had I set aside because they didn't fit neatly into life as Mrs. Daniel Miller? The marketing career, obviously, but also smaller things. The watercolor painting, the photography club I'd briefly joined before Daniel pointed out it conflicted with his firm's client dinners, even my preference for spicier foods that Catherine Miller found too ethnic for family gatherings. "I need a glass of wine," I declared, suddenly overwhelmed. Olivia closed the box and stood. "I think we both do." 2 glasses in, seated on Olivia's living room floor surrounded by the artifacts of my former self, I finally allowed myself to cry properly. Not the shock tears of Thanksgiving night, but deep, body-shaking sobs of grief for 8 years spent slowly erasing myself. "I don't even know who I am without him," I admitted once the tears subsided. "Bullshit," Olivia said, refilling my glass. "You're Rebecca Carson. You graduated top of our class in marketing. You led that campaign that won the regional award our first year at Westfield. You speak conversational Spanish. You make incredible paella. You're the friend who drove 4 hours to help me move when that asshole Jeremy dumped me via text." "That was years ago," I protested weakly. "So? You think those qualities just disappeared because Daniel Miller didn't find them useful to his career trajectory? They're still in there." She pointed at my chest. "You just need to find them again." The next evening, I found myself walking into the community center where the career workshop was being held. The room was arranged with chairs in a semicircle. About 15 women of various ages already seated, some chatting, others reviewing the handouts placed on each chair. I selected a seat near the back, scanning the materials. "Returning to your career path. Strategies for women after family breaks," read the header, followed by statistics about women's career interruptions and strategies for addressing resume gaps. "Is this seat taken?" I looked up to find a woman about my age, stylishly dressed in a geometric print wrap dress, indicating the chair beside me. "No, please," I gestured. "I'm Diana Chen," she said, extending her hand. "First time here?" "Rebecca Carson," I replied, the maiden name still unfamiliar on my tongue. "And yes, very first time. You?" "I'm actually one of the presenters," Diana smiled. "I work at Evergreen Marketing. We sponsor these workshops quarterly." Before I could respond, a petite woman with silver-streaked black hair called the group to attention, introducing herself as the workshop facilitator. Diana squeezed my arm gently before moving to the front of the room. For the next 2 hours, I listened as women shared stories of career interruptions, some for children, others for partners' careers, a few for health reasons. Diana presented a segment on current marketing industry trends and how they differed from 10 years prior. When the facilitator asked for volunteers to outline their career goals for group feedback, I surprised myself by raising my hand. Standing before these strangers felt oddly liberating. "I'm Rebecca Carson," I began. "I was a marketing associate at Westfield in Seattle before relocating for my husband's career 8 years ago. I've been working in school administration, but after recent life changes, I'm exploring a return to marketing." Diana nodded encouragingly. "Any specific area of marketing that interests you?" "I specialized in campaign development for small businesses," I said. Memories of projects I'd once been passionate about resurfacing, helping local enterprises compete against larger chains by developing distinctive brand identities. "That's still very much in demand," Diana confirmed, "especially with the emphasis on supporting local businesses post-pandemic. What's holding you back from jumping in?" The directness of her question momentarily stalled me. What was holding me back? The easy answer was practical. My resume had an 8-year gap, my contacts were outdated, the industry had evolved. But beneath those, Concerns lay something deeper. Fear. Fear that I had lost whatever spark had made me good at my job. Fear that I was now permanently defined as Daniel Miller's soon-to-be ex-wife rather than a professional in my own right. I'm concerned my skills may be outdated, I said finally, opting for the safest answer. The facilitator suggested resources for skill refreshers, and another participant mentioned an upcoming digital marketing certificate program at Portland Community College. Diana added Evergreen's internship program for career returners, designed specifically for women re-entering the workforce. After the workshop concluded, Diana sought me out. "Your background is impressive," she said. "Those early Westfield campaigns showed real vision. Would you be interested in coffee sometime? I'd be happy to share more about our returner program." I accepted her business card, a flutter of something like hope stirring for the first time since Thanksgiving. Maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward that had nothing to do with being Mrs. Daniel Miller. 2 days later, I met Diana at Pine Street Coffee, a hip independent shop in Southeast Portland. She arrived with a portfolio and a warm smile. "I looked up some of your work from Westfield," she said after we'd settled with our drinks. "The Harborside Bookshop campaign especially caught my attention. You managed to position an independent store against Amazon in a way that wasn't David versus Goliath, but rather local treasure versus faceless algorithm. Very clever." Warmth spread through me at the professional recognition. "That was my favorite project," I admitted. The owner had such passion for connecting the right books with the right readers. I wanted the campaign to reflect that personal touch. "It did," Diana confirmed, opening her portfolio. "Which is why I brought this. Evergreen has a new client, Riverside Collective, a group of small businesses along the Willamette that are struggling against a planned development by Cascade Partners." My breath caught. "Cascade Partners is my husband's firm." Diana's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ex-husband, I'm guessing, given your name change and the life changes you mentioned." "Soon-to-be ex," I clarified. She studied me for a long moment. "Is that a conflict of interest for you?" Was it? Daniel and I were separating. His professional interests were no longer mine to protect, and yet, taking on a project directly opposing his firm felt like a deliberate provocation. "I'm not sure," I said honestly. Diana nodded thoughtfully. "Let me approach this differently. Cascade Partners recently brought in a new junior partner to head the Riverside development, an Ashley Parker. Any relation?" The name hit like a physical blow. Ashley. Daniel's executive assistant turned mistress, now apparently junior partner. Another piece of information Daniel hadn't shared. Not just a romantic relationship, but a professional promotion. "She's the woman my husband left me for," I said, my voice steady despite the renewed hurt. At Thanksgiving dinner, with his entire family present. Diana's professional composure momentarily slipped, her eyes widening. "Wow, that's significantly awful. I'm sorry." "Thank you." I took a deep breath. "In that case, no, I don't see a conflict of interest. In fact, I'd be very interested in hearing more about this project." A smile slowly spread across Diana's face. "Well then, let me tell you about Riverside Collective and their unique challenges." For the next hour, Diana outlined the situation. Riverside Collective was a group of 12 small businesses in an old industrial area being revitalized along Portland's waterfront. Cascade Partners had acquired several adjacent properties and planned a mixed-use development that would significantly impact the collective's foot traffic and potentially price them out of the area. The collective needed a marketing strategy that would rally community support and position them as essential to the neighborhood's character. As Diana spoke, ideas began flowing, a Faces of Riverside campaign highlighting the local owners and their connections to Portland, targeted social media to demonstrate the collective's economic impact, a series of community events to strengthen neighborhood ties. I'd need to refresh my technical skills, I cautioned. The digital landscape has changed significantly since I was actively working. That's where our returner program comes in, Diana explained. It's a 12-week paid internship specifically designed for professionals re-entering after career breaks. You'd work directly with me on the Riverside account, with structured training to update your technical knowledge. If it's a good fit, it potentially leads to a permanent position. The opportunity felt almost too perfect, a chance to reclaim my professional identity while working with businesses not unlike the ones I'd most enjoyed supporting at Westfield. And if it happened to put me in direct opposition to Daniel and Ashley? Well, that wasn't my primary motivation, but I couldn't pretend it didn't add a certain satisfaction. When does the program start? I asked. Next cohort begins January 15th, Diana said. Applications close December 20th. I'd be happy to put in a good word if you're interested. I am, I confirmed. Very interested. Diana beamed. Excellent. I'll email you the application details today. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, Diana paused. One more thing, Rebecca. If you do join Evergreen, the Riverside account would be strictly business. I just want to be clear that we couldn't use any insider information about Cascade Partners, even if you happen to have it. I understand completely, I assured her. To be honest, Daniel never discussed business details with me anyway. He didn't think I'd find it interesting or relevant. A flash of something, displeasure, perhaps even anger on my behalf, crossed Diana's features. His loss, she said simply. Our gain, potentially. That evening, I shared the opportunity with Olivia over takeout Thai food spread across her living room floor. It sounds perfect, she declared after I'd outlined the returner program. But are you sure you want to directly oppose Daniel's firm? That could get messy. That's not why I'm interested, I insisted, though not entirely truthfully. The project aligns perfectly with my background and interests. Olivia gave me a knowing look. Uh-huh. And the fact that you'd be directly competing with the mistress-turned-junior partner has nothing to do with it? It's a factor, I admitted, but not the primary motivation. This is about me, Liv. About reclaiming the career I set aside. About remembering who Rebecca Carson is professionally. Fair enough, she conceded. And what does Marcus think? Any legal concerns? I'd consulted with Marcus earlier that day, updating him on Daniel's unilateral decisions about my belongings and the career opportunity with Evergreen. He says as long as I don't use any confidential information from my marriage, there's no conflict of interest. Oregon's a no-fault divorce state, so even if Daniel tried to paint it as me being vindictive, it wouldn't affect the divorce settlement. Olivia raised her wine glass in a toast. To Rebecca Carson's professional renaissance. Then, I clinked my glass against hers, allowing myself to feel genuine optimism for the first time in weeks. To new beginnings. December brought practical challenges alongside emotional ones. I needed to retrieve the rest of my belongings from the house, arrange more permanent housing than Olivia's spare room, and navigate the holidays as a newly single person. The divorce proceedings had officially begun, with Daniel's attorney sending over the initial settlement proposal, one that, according to Marcus, significantly undervalued my contributions to our marriage. This offer assumes you're entitled to support based solely on your current earning capacity at the school district, Marcus explained during our review meeting. It doesn't account for the career opportunities you sacrifice to support his advancement. We'll counter, of course. I nodded, trying to focus on the legal details rather than the emotional reality that 8 years of partnership had been reduced to financial calculations and asset divisions. Marcus hesitated before continuing. There's something else you should know. I received a call from Mr. Miller's attorney expressing concern about your potential employment with Evergreen Marketing, given their work with Riverside Collective. My jaw tightened. I haven't even formally applied yet. How does he know about that? Portland's business community is smaller than it seems, Marcus replied diplomatically. He suggested that such employment could be construed as attempting to use the divorce to interfere with Mr. Miller's business interests. That's ridiculous, I protested. I'm pursuing a legitimate professional opportunity that happens to align with my experience. The fact that it involves clients opposing Cascade partners is coincidental. Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly at coincidental, but didn't challenge me. I informed his attorney that your career choices are your own, and that attempting to restrict your employment options could be seen as continued controlling behavior, which wouldn't reflect well in divorce proceedings. I felt a surge of gratitude for Marcus's forthright advocacy. Thank you. That said, he continued, I'd advise documenting everything related to this employment opportunity, how you learned of it, the application process, any communications, with Evergreen. If Mr. Miller attempts to characterize this as vindictive behavior, we'll want a clear record showing legitimate professional interest. I left Marcus's office with renewed determination. Daniel was attempting to control my choices, even as our marriage ended, using legal threats to intimidate me from pursuing a path he found inconvenient. The realization crystallized something within me. This divorce wasn't just about ending a marriage, but about reclaiming my autonomy. The following weekend, I finally faced the dreaded task of retrieving my remaining belongings from the house. Olivia offered to accompany me, but I decided to go alone, preferably while Daniel was at work. I needed to confront this space, once my home, on my own terms. I timed my visit for a Tuesday morning, when Daniel would typically be in meetings. What I hadn't anticipated was Ashley's sleek red Audi in the driveway. She had moved in already, barely a month after Thanksgiving. For a moment, I considered rescheduling. The thought of facing Ashley in what had been my home, touching my things, sleeping in my bed, was almost unbearable. But returning the key Marcus had managed to secure for me meant another round of legal communications, another delay in moving forward. Steeling myself, I used the key and entered. The house was quieter. Then I remembered. The familiar scents replaced by something floral and unfamiliar. Ashley's perfume, perhaps. I moved through the entryway, noting minor changes already implemented. Different throw pillows on the living room sofa. The antique side table I'd loved replaced with something sleeker and more modern. I headed upstairs to collect clothing and personal items from the master bedroom, hoping to avoid encountering Ashley. No such luck. She emerged from the home office as I reached the top of the stairs, dressed casually in yoga pants and one of Daniel's Columbia Business School sweatshirts. My stomach twisted at the sight of her in his clothing, so casually claiming what had once been mine. "Rebecca," she said, clearly startled. "Daniel didn't mention you'd be coming by today." "I informed his attorney," I replied, proud of how steady my voice remained. "I'm just here for my things." Ashley nodded, visibly uncomfortable. Good. Let her feel uncomfortable. Let her understand that actions have consequences, that her happiness had been built on my pain. "I can make myself scarce," she offered, gesturing toward the stairs. "Give you some privacy." "That would be appreciated," I said coolly. She hesitated, then surprised me. For what it's worth, I never intended things to happen this way. The Thanksgiving dinner. That wasn't my idea. I told Daniel we should wait. Was I supposed to be grateful for this revelation? That she'd wanted to postpone my humiliation rather than prevent it? That she'd had enough awareness to recognize the cruelty of their actions, but not enough integrity to refuse participation? Yet you came anyway, I observed. You wore that bracelet, the one Daniel bought with our joint credit card. You sat in his family's home and accepted their welcome while knowing I was being kept in the dark. Ashley had the grace to flush, slightly. "I made mistakes," she admitted. "We both did, but Daniel and I I'm not interested in hearing about you and Daniel, I interrupted. Your relationship isn't my concern anymore. But since we're having this conversation, I do have one question. She waited, wariness evident in her posture. When did you receive your promotion to junior partner? Before or after you began sleeping with my husband? The question clearly caught her off guard. How did you— Portland's business community is smaller than it seems, I echoed Marcus's words from earlier. Ashley's expression hardened slightly. My promotion was based on merit, not my personal relationship with Daniel. I've worked extremely hard at Cascade. I'm sure you have, I replied evenly, in various capacities. She bristled at the implication. You don't know anything about me or my professional qualifications. You're right, I conceded. Just as you knew nothing about me or our marriage when you decided to insert yourself into it. We're even on that front at least. Without waiting for her response, I moved past her toward the master bedroom, intent on completing my task as quickly as possible. Daniel said you were bitter, Ashley called after me. I can see he was right. I paused, turning back to face her. Is that what Daniel tells you? That I'm bitter? That I'm being difficult or unreasonable? She didn't respond, but her expression confirmed my suspicion. Let me offer some free advice, Ashley. Daniel has a pattern. When things don't go exactly as he's planned, when people don't behave exactly as he expects, they become the problem. They're bitter, unreasonable, difficult, emotional. It was never you, until someday, inevitably, it will be. I left her standing in the hallway, momentarily speechless. In the bedroom, I efficiently packed my remaining clothing, jewelry, and personal items into the suitcases I'd brought. As I worked, I noticed how thoroughly Ashley had already claimed the space, her products in the bathroom, her books on the nightstand, her decorative touches replacing mine. The speed with which I'd been erased from this home was both painful and illuminating. How easily disposable I'd been to Daniel, how quickly replaced. I wondered if Ashley realized she was equally replaceable, or if she believed herself special, exempt from the pattern I'd identified. As I prepared to leave, suitcases packed and loaded into my car, Ashley appeared in the kitchen where I was collecting a few cherished cookbooks. I meant what I said earlier, she said, her voice softer now. I never wanted things to happen this way. I regarded her thoughtfully. In another life, under different circumstances, perhaps I could have found compassion for her. This younger woman who'd fallen for her charismatic boss, who perhaps didn't fully understand the destruction she'd participated in. But not today. Not yet. How we want things to happen and how they actually happen are often very different, I said finally, something I've been learning lately. With that, I closed the cookbook I'd been holding, decided against taking it after all, and walked out of the house that had never truly been mine. My first day at Evergreen Marketing felt like stepping into a parallel universe where my skills and opinions actually mattered. Diana had championed my application through the returner program, and by mid-January, I found myself with a desk, a company email, and a position on the Riverside Collective account team. The office culture was nothing like I'd expected, collaborative, rather than competitive, with flexible hours and a leadership team that was predominantly female. The conference room is ready whenever you are, Diana informed me, poking her head into the small workspace I shared with two other returner program participants. Gregory Patel from the bookstore is especially excited to meet you. I mentioned your work with Harborside Books in Seattle. The Riverside Collective representatives gathered around the polished conference table, 12 small business owners whose livelihoods were threatened by Cascade Partners' development plans. As Diana facilitated introductions, I studied their faces. Gregory from Watermark Books, Elena from River City Ceramics, James and Michael from the Craft Brewery, Priya from the Fair Trade Coffee Shop. People who had poured their lives into building something meaningful, now facing displacement by the corporate machine my husband, ex-husband, helped operate. Rebecca will be leading our strategic planning for the awareness campaign, Diana explained, giving me an encouraging nod. I've reviewed the development proposal, I began, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Cascade Partners is positioning this as neighborhood improvement, but their renderings show high-end retail spaces with price points that would exclude the current customer base. Exactly, Gregory confirmed, leaning forward. They're using terms like revitalization and urban renewal, but it's really gentrification that will price out both us and our clientele. Which is why we need to control the narrative, I continued, the strategic part of my brain fully engaged now. The central question isn't whether development should happen. Change is inevitable in growing cities. The question is whether that development should preserve what makes this neighborhood special, which is all of you. For the next hour, I outlined my initial thoughts, a campaign featuring the faces and stories behind each business, statistics showing their economic impact, a series of community events to strengthen local ties, and targeted media outreach to challenge Cascade's corporate narrative. The key is making this about people, not just buildings, I concluded. Cascade wants to make this an abstract discussion about property values and tax revenue. We need to make it a conversation about community identity and what kind of city Portland wants to be. The energy in the room was palpable as business owners added their own ideas, building on the framework I'd presented. By the time the meeting concluded, we had the backbone of a campaign strategy and a calendar of next steps. That was impressive, Diana commented as we walked back to the main office area. You didn't just present a marketing plan, you gave them hope. Her praise warmed me, but something else felt even better. The reconnection with my professional self, the part of me that could analyze problems, craft narratives, and build strategies. This was who I had been before Daniel, who I could be again after him. The divorce proceedings crawled forward with the typical legal back and forth. Daniel's initial lowball offer had been rejected, countered, and now negotiated into something Marcus deemed approaching reasonable. On paper, I would emerge financially secure, if not wealthy, enough to eventually buy a modest condo and rebuild my retirement savings. But money had never been my primary concern. He's asking for a confidentiality clause, Marcus informed me during our February update meeting, prohibiting either party from disparaging the other publicly or professionally. Is that standard? I asked, surprised. Not particularly in divorces of this scale, Marcus admitted. His attorney mentioned concerns about your work with Riverside Collective. They're suggesting your employment choice could constitute an attempt to harm Mr. Miller professionally. I couldn't help but laugh. So he can leave me for his assistant at Thanksgiving dinner in front of his entire family, but I can't accept a legitimate job offer because it might incidentally oppose his business interests? Marcus's expression remained neutral, but a slight quirk of his eyebrow suggested he found the situation equally absurd. They're offering additional financial considerations if you accept the confidentiality terms. He's trying to buy my silence, I translated. Again. Essentially, Marcus confirmed. How would you like to proceed? I considered the question carefully. The additional money would provide greater security, perhaps even enough for a more comfortable home or extended career retraining if needed. But accepting felt too much like the pattern of our marriage. Daniel making decisions, creating problems, then offering financial solutions that maintained his control. Reject the confidentiality clause, I decided. I have no intention of disparaging Daniel publicly, but I won't sign away my right to speak truthfully about my own experiences. Marcus nodded, making a note. I'll communicate that to his counsel. As winter yielded to spring, I settled into a new rhythm. The returner program at Evergreen transitioned to a full-time position as the Riverside campaign gained traction. I found an affordable one-bedroom apartment in a charming converted brownstone, a space entirely my own that had never known Daniel's presence. Each decision, from the vibrant teal sofa Olivia helped me select to the spice-heavy recipes I practiced, in my compact kitchen, felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. The Riverside campaign was making waves. Local media had picked up our Faces of Riverside profiles, community events drew increasing crowds, and neighborhood support had forced the City Planning Commission to schedule additional public hearings on Cascade's permit applications. Our success hadn't gone unnoticed by Cascade Partners, which had launched its own PR counteroffensive highlighting job creation and tax benefits. In late April, Gregory Patel called me directly rather than going through official Evergreen channels. "Rebecca, I thought you should know. Daniel Miller came into my bookstore yesterday." My stomach tightened. What did he want? Ostensibly to browse. But he made a point of mentioning he was with Cascade Partners, asked pointed questions about our campaign, and suggested there might be creative solutions that could benefit Watermark Books within their development plans. "He tried to poach you?" I translated. "Pretty transparently," Gregory confirmed. "I told him our collective has strength in unity, and that we're quite happy with our current marketing strategy. Thank you very much." After thanking Gregory for the information, I sat at my desk, unsettled. Daniel, making a personal appearance at a client business, crossed a line from professional competition into something more targeted. What bothered me wasn't the business tactic itself. Divide and conquer was hardly new. But the feeling that his approach to Gregory was at least partially motivated by my involvement. I mentioned the incident to Diana during our weekly check-in, her brow furrowed in concern. "That's uncomfortably close to interference. Has he attempted to contact you directly about the campaign?" "No," I assured her. "All communication has been through attorneys since November." "Good, let's keep it that way, but document this incident just in case." The divorce was finalized in early May, the paperwork arriving with anticlimactic simplicity given the emotional complexity of ending an 8-year marriage. I was officially Rebecca Carson again, legally and financially untethered from Daniel Miller. That evening, Olivia hosted a small independence party with a few close friends, complete with a cake frosted with "Congratulations on your divorce" in cheerful blue icing. The following week brought an unexpected email from Catherine Miller. I nearly deleted it unread, assuming it contained some belated justification for her role in the Thanksgiving ambush. Curiosity prevailed, however, and I opened it during my BTW lunch break. "Rebecca," it began formally, "I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to inform you that the annual Miller Family Summer Gathering at Lake Oswego is scheduled for May 25th. While I understand you may have no desire to attend, given the circumstances, Richard and I would very much appreciate your presence for a portion of the event. We have matters to discuss that would be best addressed in person. If this is agreeable, please let me know." I stared at the screen, baffled. The annual Miller Summer barbecue was a tradition I knew well, a day-long affair where family achievements were celebrated, announcements made, and Richard ceremonially awarded his prized whiskey glass to whichever family member had most impressed him that year. What possible reason could Catherine have for wanting me there? I forwarded the email to Olivia with a single question mark. Her response came minutes later. "Trap! Do not go!" Her reaction mirrored my initial instinct, and yet, something about the formal tone, so typical of Catherine, suggested this wasn't merely a ploy. Catherine Miller was many things: status-conscious, traditional, sometimes emotionally reserved. But she wasn't cruel. Whatever her reasons for inviting me, they likely weren't malicious. After considerable deliberation, I responded with equal formality. "Catherine, thank you for the invitation. I'm willing to attend briefly for the discussion you mentioned. Please understand that my presence should not be interpreted as anything other than courtesy. I would appreciate knowing the nature of what you wish to discuss before I confirm. Rebecca. Her reply arrived the following morning. The matter concerns Richard's health and certain promises made during your marriage to Daniel. We prefer to discuss this privately. Your discretion and understanding are appreciated. Richard's health. The mention sent an unexpected pang through me. Despite everything, I had genuinely cared for my former father-in-law. His gruff exterior concealed a dry wit and occasional surprising thoughtfulness. During my marriage, he had promised that a family heirloom, a vintage watch that had belonged to his father, would one day go to my and Daniel's child. Was that the promise Catherine referenced? After consulting with Marcus, who confirmed there were no legal reasons to avoid the meeting now that the divorce was finalized, I agreed to attend for 1 hour, specifying I would arrive after the main family luncheon to maintain appropriate boundaries. The day of the Miller gathering dawned sunny and mild, perfect weather for their lakeside property. I selected my outfit carefully, a cobalt blue dress I'd purchased during a shopping trip with Diana, professional without being severe, paired with the statement necklace Natalie had sent as a divorce present. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the confident woman reflected back at me, so different from the shattered person who had fled the Thanksgiving dinner 6 months earlier. I timed my arrival for 2:30 p.m. when I knew the family would have finished lunch, but the full afternoon's festivities would still be underway. Approaching the familiar lakeside property, I spotted the usual collection of vehicles, Matt's SUV, Emily and Paul's sedan, and prominently positioned near the front, the red Audi that now registered as Ashley's rather than belonging to an unknown guest. Catherine opened the door before I could knock, her expression a careful blend of politeness and caution. Rebecca, thank you for coming. You look well. Thank you, I replied, maintaining the same civil tone. You mentioned something about Richard's health? Yes, but first, she gestured toward the great room where voices indicated the family had gathered. Richard would like to include you in the annual traditions, given your long standing with the family, just for this final year. The request seemed peculiar but not unreasonable. I nodded my agreement, following Catherine through the familiar hallway into the great room where the Miller family was assembled. The conversation died. As I entered, all eyes turning toward me with expressions ranging from surprise, Emily, to discomfort, Matt, to outright alarm, Daniel. Ashley stood beside him, her hand possessively on his arm, wearing a sundress that likely cost more than my monthly rent. Rebecca has kindly agreed to join us for the annual traditions, Catherine announced, as if my presence were the most natural thing in the world. Richard was most insistent. Richard Miller sat in his customary leather chair, looking somewhat thinner than I remembered, but with the same commanding presence. He nodded at me with something that might have been approval. Perfect timing, he declared. We were just about to get to the announcements and the whiskey glass ceremony. An awkward silence followed, broken only when Emily stepped forward to offer me a glass of the signature summer sangria. I accepted with a murmured thanks, positioning myself slightly apart from the family circle, near the French doors that led to the deck. Richard cleared his throat, commanding attention as he always did. As you all know, this past year has brought significant changes to our family. Some celebrations, some challenges, my health being among the latter. This was news to me. I glanced at Catherine, who was watching her husband with a tightly controlled expression. Nothing to get dramatic about, Richard continued, waving away concern. Just a reminder that time moves forward, and we should honor what matters. Which brings me to this year's recognitions. The annual Miller family tradition, Richard's, acknowledging achievements, typically weighted heavily toward business success and status advancement. I'd witnessed Daniel receive the coveted whiskey glass 3 times during our marriage, each time for professional milestones. Daniel and Ashley, Richard began, causing the couple to straighten attentively. Congratulations on your engagement. Ashley, welcome officially to the family. Engagement. The word landed like a physical blow, though I maintained my neutral expression. Daniel hadn't mentioned this development during our legal proceedings, though I supposed he wasn't obligated to. Still, the speed of it, not even a month since our divorce was finalized, spoke volumes about how completely he had moved on. Or perhaps how thoroughly he had moved on long before the divorce. Matthew, Richard continued, turning to his younger son, your firm's expansion to Seattle shows promising growth. Well done. Matt nodded, accepting the recognition with typical reserved grace. Emily and Paul, congratulations on the new house in West Hills, a fine neighborhood for raising the children. Richard took a sip of water, his gaze finally turning to me. And Rebecca, though no longer officially a Miller, your work with Riverside Collective has not gone unnoticed. Quite an effective campaign you've developed. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, while Ashley's grip on his arm visibly tightened. I maintained my composure, offering a simple thank you in response to the unexpected recognition. Which brings us to this year's whiskey glass recipient, Richard announced, reaching for the cut crystal tumbler that symbolized his highest approval. The family leaned forward slightly in anticipation. Daniel's expression shifted to the confident expectation I knew well, the look of a man accustomed to recognition, particularly in his father's eyes. Richard turned the glass thoughtfully in his hands before continuing. This year's recipient demonstrated remarkable resilience, professional reinvention, and strategic thinking of the highest order. Their work has not only revitalized their own prospects, but potentially saved numerous small businesses from corporate displacement. He paused, his gaze moving deliberately from Daniel to me. Rebecca, this year's glass is yours. The room went utterly still. Daniel's face registered shock, then disbelief, then tightly controlled fury. Ashley's mouth opened slightly before snapping shut. Catherine, interestingly, showed no surprise at all, suggesting she had known of Richard's intention before I arrived. Richard, that's hardly appropriate, Daniel finally managed, his voice strained. Rebecca isn't family anymore. The glass goes to whom I decide it goes to, Richard replied firmly. And Rebecca's campaign for Riverside has shown more business acumen than anything I've seen from Cascade Partners this year, especially your handling of the development proposal, which lacked both strategic foresight and community engagement. I moved forward, accepting the crystal tumbler with steady hands. Thank you, Richard. I'm surprised, but honored. You shouldn't be surprised, he replied gruffly. Quality work deserves recognition, regardless of family politics. The moment crystallized something I'd been feeling for months without fully articulating it. Vindication. Not just professional recognition, though that was deeply satisfying, but acknowledgement of my value independent of my relationship to Daniel. The very thing that had been missing throughout my marriage. If you'll all excuse us, Catherine interjected smoothly, Richard and Rebecca have a private matter to discuss. We'll rejoin you shortly. As Catherine led me toward Richard's study, I caught Daniel's expression, a complex mixture of anger, confusion, and something that might have been regret. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I looked at him and felt nothing but a distant pity for a man so focused on appearances that he had lost sight of what actually mattered. In Richard's study, with the door firmly closed against family curiosity, Catherine explained the real purpose of my invitation. Richard's health challenge was a recently diagnosed heart condition that, while manageable, had prompted him to update his will and address outstanding promises. The vintage watch, I guessed. Richard nodded. I promised it would go to your child someday. Obviously, circumstances have changed. Obviously, I agreed, expecting him to reclaim the promise entirely. Instead, he surprised me again. I've amended my will. The watch will be held in trust. Should you ever have children, regardless of who their father may be. They will receive it when they turn 21. My promise was to you as much as to Daniel, and I keep my promises. The unexpected gesture of respect, of seeing me as a person independent of my relationship to his son, brought the first tears I'd shed since entering the Miller property. Thank you, Richard. That's extraordinarily kind. It's not kindness, he corrected firmly. It's recognition of character, something I've perhaps been too slow to properly evaluate in the past. As I drove away from the Lake Oswego property an hour later, whiskey glass carefully wrapped and placed on the passenger seat beside me, I felt the final piece of my post-Daniel identity click into place. The woman who had fled in humiliation on Thanksgiving was gone, replaced by someone stronger, clearer, more authentically herself. Rebecca Carson, professional strategist, valued for her mind rather than her supporting role. Rebecca Carson, recognized not for who she had married, but for what she had built. Rebecca Carson, at last the main character in her own story. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.